Hi, welcome to the 32 in 32 Fantasy Football Waiver Wire show for week 13. It's getting to crunch time in the fantasy regular seasons. It's hard to believe it's already near the end, only 2 more weeks in most leagues' regular seasons. So let's get right to the week 12 review for the Thanksgiving games, 3 games. Actually, the Bears, the Lions played a pretty good game. Cowboys and the Raiders played an excellent game. The game that I thought would be the best would be the Bills and the Saints, and that was the biggest dud. Buffalo just crushed New Orleans 31-6 in a game the Saints weren't ever really in. Injuries are really starting to pile up for some of the teams that had hoped to contend. The Titans just put wide receiver A.J. Brown on injured reserve, and he will be out until at least week 15. They're already missing Derrick Henry. Julio Jones has been on IR. They've had a lot of injuries on the defense, and they are kind of reeling right now. It's a good thing they banked 8 wins in the first 10 weeks of the season, and it is a good week for them to have a bye. The Rams, on the other hand, are just coming out of a bye, and Matthew Stafford is dealing with back and arm injuries, and he just does not look anything like he did earlier in the season. They're already missing a host of guys: Cam Akers, Robert Woods, guys on defense, and they've been losing some games. Again, they have 7 wins going in to this next week, but they are kind of scuffling to stay in contention. The Steelers, pretty much everything that has happened has kind of caught up to them. They just got hammered by Cincinnati yesterday, 41-3, and they've had some more losses on the defense yesterday. The Saints, everything: Jameis Winston, Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram, Michael Thomas never suited up this year. A lot of injuries on the defense. They've lost 4 in a row, and their season is really getting away from them. Got to issue an apology for recommending Cam Newton at all. He had one of the worst games I ever saw yesterday, and I'm sure he was in some lineups. He was 5 of 21 for about 92 yards with no touchdowns and 2 interceptions passing yesterday. Fortunately, he managed to run one in, but he only had 5 yards rushing. He was a dud, and most of his production came on a 64-yard pass to DJ Moore. Still one game to play in week 12. The Monday night game will be Seattle at Washington. The wind won't be much of a problem, but it's going to be pretty cold there. It's going to be in the mid 30s at game time, and it's going to be going down to about freezing by the end of the game. For Seattle, can Russell Wilson rebound? He has been a liability to fantasy teams since he hurt his finger. Hopefully, he can start bouncing back. They've got this game, and then they've got a big game coming up against the 49ers next week. A couple of guys that Washington is hoping to get back tonight. Curtis Samuel, who has only played 2 games so far this year, and I'm being a little generous there because he didn't play much of the second game. But they're hoping to get him back tonight, and tight end Logan Thomas, who has been out since week 3, is hopefully going to be back tonight. And that would be a boost to one of my quarterback streamers for this week, Taylor Heineke. Let's look at some of the new injuries that happened over the weekend. For Dallas, Dallas and New Orleans are playing another Thursday game this week. Dallas running back Ezekiel Elliott is not a new injury, but apparently his knee is not doing very well. He's been dealing with that for a while, and he did not play a lot on Thursday against the Raiders, and they're talking about sitting him this week. So cheers if you have Tony Pollard. Get him in your lineups. For Detroit, a big injury happened. Running back DeAndre Swift suffered a shoulder injury that looked really painful looking at him on the sideline after it happened. He was grimacing very badly. Can't imagine he doesn't miss some time. Also lost right cornerback Bobby Price to a shoulder injury and right inside linebacker Jalen Reeves-Maybin to a shoulder injury. On the Chicago side of the ball, wide receiver Marquise Goodwin suffered a foot injury, and a big injury on the defensive side. Left inside linebacker Roquan Smith, who is a very highly regarded linebacker, suffered a hamstring injury. And soft tissue injuries like that are really tough. They'll have to determine how severe it is, but I can't imagine he isn't going to miss any time. For Las Vegas, the Raiders lost tight end Darren Waller during Thursday's game, first to a back injury that he has been dealing with over the last few weeks. And then he came back in and suffered a knee injury. That doesn't sound like it's too severe, but keep an eye on that. He could certainly miss a game. Also, the Raiders lost right defensive end Carl Nassib to a knee injury. Big injury for the Bills in the Thursday night game. Left cornerback Tre'Davious White suffered a knee injury, and they are concerned that he's done for the season. It'd be a huge blow to their secondary, especially given that they've got a tough game coming up with the Patriots. And then in a couple of weeks after that, they will play the Patriots again. For the New York Giants, right cornerback Adoree Jackson suffered a quad injury. He was one of their top free agent signings going into 2021. And his backup, Darnay Holmes, also suffered a chest injury. And one thing you don't want to hear when you're talking about cornerbacks is third string cornerback. So hopefully those guys aren't hurt too bad for the Giants. Philadelphia lost right guard Jack Driscoll to an ankle injury, and he will be evaluated. Pittsburgh lost right inside linebacker Robert Spillane to a knee injury. He's not a starter, but he's definitely a rotational guy, and he gets around on the field. He's a good player. Hopefully he doesn't miss too much time. Cincinnati lost two offensive linemen, right tackle Riley Reif to an ankle injury, and center Trey Hopkins also to an ankle injury. And that's 2/5 of their offensive line, and that's not a deep offensive line. So hopefully those guys aren't out too long. Tampa Bay lost left guard Aaron Stinney to a knee injury. He's already the backup for Ali Marpet, who's missed some time. Again, we're talking third string at this point, although it didn't seem to bother Leonard Fournette too much yesterday, who had the third 4+ touchdown game in the last 2 weeks. They also lost right cornerback Jamel Dean to a shoulder injury. He's had a tough year dealing with injuries. Hopefully he won't be out too long. Big one in Carolina. Running back Christian McCaffrey suffered an ankle injury, and he was spotted sporting a walking boot after the game. Silver lining is they do have their bye this week, so he will have a couple of weeks to deal with that. Hopefully he is not going to miss any times, because that would be a huge loss heading into the fantasy playoffs. Tennessee lost right inside linebacker Monty Rice to an ankle injury. And again, he was a backup to Rashaan Evans. Continuing with injuries, Jacksonville lost tight end Dan Arnold, who is one of my favorites on the show. I mentioned several times. He suffered a knee injury yesterday that I heard this morning was a grade 2 MCL sprain, which means he will be out 4 to 6 weeks. And in all likelihood, his season is done, as they only have 6 games left to go. They also lost left inside linebacker Damian Wilson to an ankle injury. The Jets lost a couple of key defensive players yesterday. Left defensive tackle Sheldon Rankin suffered a knee injury, and strong side linebacker Quincy Williams suffered a calf injury. Those guys were wreaking havoc on the Texans yesterday before they got hurt. hopefully for the Jets' sake, they are not out too long. A couple of big injuries for the Vikings. Running back Dalvin Cook, who had already been dealing with a torn labrum in one shoulder, uh, separated his shoulder or dislocated his shoulder, the other shoulder. So he will be evaluated. I can't imagine he doesn't miss any time. Also, strong side linebacker Anthony Barr suffered a hamstring injury. Again, hamstrings, yuck. For San Francisco, running back Trey Sermon got hurt on special teams, suffered an ankle injury, did not return. Also, a couple of key defensive injuries for them. Weak side linebacker Dre Greenlaw suffered a groin injury. He had just come back after missing multiple weeks. And middle linebacker Fred Warner suffered a hamstring injury. If those guys miss much time, the 49ers are going to be hurting. But the big injury that they had yesterday was wide receiver Deebo Samuel suffered a groin injury and didn't return to the game. Little bit of good news as I watched that game, and Deebo pretty much remained on the sideline, and he looked like he was in decent spirits. So hopefully he isn't hurt too bad. For the Broncos, quarterback Teddy Bridgewater suffered a lower leg injury and missed a couple of series, missed the end of the first half, actually. And they're calling that a contusion, which is a fancy name for a bruise. Hopefully that doesn't keep him out of action. But they did suffer a couple injuries on the offensive line. Left guard Dalton Reisner suffered a back injury, and left tackle Calvin Anderson suffered a knee injury, and he's already the backup to Garrett Bowles, who's been out multiple weeks. That's the whole left side of their line. That just is not a good look. For the Rams, special team wide receiver J.J. Koski suffered a hamstring injury, mostly mentioning him because he had been put out there to spell Cooper Kupp from return duties. And if he's hurt bad, Kupp is definitely a possibility to come back on at least punt returns. Green Bay wide receiver Randall Cobb, who had been having a good day, suffered a groin injury, did not return to the game. And last night, Cleveland lost right tackle Jack Conklin to a knee injury and tight end Harrison Bryant to an ankle injury. And Bryant had been pretty active in the early part of the game that he was in. Of course, Conklin would be a problem for them. And that's a team that's also struggling. The final two bye weeks are upon us. Yay. Week 13, Carolina, Cleveland, Green Bay, and Tennessee are all off. That's a pretty big one for me. I have a lot of their players. Of course, Christian McCaffrey, who's injured. DJ Moore for the Panthers. I'm sure people have Cam Newton. For Cleveland, Baker Mayfield, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, and Jarvis Landry are the main guys in fantasy there. For Green Bay, few guys, Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, Devontae Adams are the main guys. Deeper leagues, you've got Alan Lazard or Marcus Valdez-Scantling or even Randall Cobb. And for Tennessee, they've pretty much already been wiped out by injury, but I'm sure some people are still hanging on to Ryan Tannehill. And the two running backs, who I'll talk about a little later, will not be available this week. And next week, week 14, the final four teams will be on bye. And that's Indianapolis, Miami, New England, and Philadelphia. Let's look at some of the guys that start in week 12 that were widely available. At the quarterback position, Mac Jones had a really nice game. Didn't throw a ton, but was very efficient. He was 23 of 32 for 310 yards and 2 touchdowns. He didn't turn the ball over. He also added 11 yards rushing on 2 carries and is currently, depending on scoring, the quarterback 6 for week 12. I don't really necessarily recommend using him this week as they play the first of 2 December games against the Buffalo Bills. And the Bills are tough on defense. Sometimes they can be had, and we'll see if the Patriots can figure them out, but I'm not going to bet on Mac Jones this week. For running backs, Buffalo's Matt Breida, who I mentioned last week, had 9 carries for 26 yards and caught both of his targets for 29 yards and a touchdown. That's not a lot of opportunity. If you are grabbing Matt Breida, you're hoping for a trip to the end zone. Buffalo's not a big running team. They've talked about involving their running backs more. And Zach Moss, I think, was a healthy scratch yesterday. So there is some opportunity for Breida, but I just don't look at them as a big running team. And it's kind of like Baltimore. Josh Allen gets a lot of the running action there. Guy I mentioned as a stream last week, Boston Scott for the Eagles, had 15 carries for 64 yards. And whenever he plays against the Giants, a lot of the times he finds a way to get into the end zone, and he did again yesterday. He also caught 2 of his 3 targets for 8 yards. He did lose a fumble, but still, you're talking in PPR 13, 14 points for a streamer as a flex or even a wide running back too. Let me put it this way. I have McCaffrey and Swift in a league, and they combined to give me 4.4 points. So I would have been very happy to have 14 points in that situation. Wide receivers for the Raiders, Deshaun Jackson had a nice game. He had 4 targets. He caught 3 of them for 102 yards and a 75-yard touchdown. And if you're using Deshaun Jackson, that's kind of what you're hoping for. He's still a decent real life player. He drew a couple of DPIs in that game. But if you're using him in fantasy, you're hoping for exactly what you got Thursday. For Dallas, Cedric Wilson popped 10 targets, 7 catches, 104 yards. He didn't find the end zone, but you got to consider him this week if for some reason Amari Cooper and or CeeDee Lamb are unable to return. For the Rams, Van Jefferson had 9 targets. He only caught 3 of them, but he did have 93 yards and a touchdown. But most of his production came on that touchdown. It was a 79-yarder where he got behind the Green Bay defense. I like Van Jefferson okay, but that's a guy that I would want more as a best bench stash than a possible starter. Also, I mentioned Randall Cobb hurt his groin, but before he left the game, he had 5 targets. He caught 4 of them for 95 yards and a long touchdown. He did lose a fumble, but that's a nice day. Problem with Cobb is inconsistency. It's the same story in Kansas City and Green Bay. You've got an alpha receiver and a bunch of other guys who kind of cannibalize each other. For tight ends, on Twitter yesterday, I said your tight end du jour was Jack Doyle. He had 7 targets. He caught 6 of them for 81 yards and a touchdown, which is a brilliant day in PPR. That's 20.1 points. I love Jack Doyle as a player. I wish they used him more in the passing game so I could trust him even as a streamer. But they also have Mo Alley Cox and Kellen Granson, who are viable targets. And if they're able to, they will run the ball more than they will throw. For the Bears, Cole Kmet had 11 targets, 8 catches, and 65 yards. He has yet to find the end zone this year, and that was with Andy Dalton under center. I might consider him this week if Dalton's still playing. Justin Fields is not able to come back from his rib injury. For Cleveland, David Njoku makes his second appearance on the show. He had 5 targets. He caught 3 of them for 35 yards and a touchdown that kind of made me shake my head because I saw a couple of angles that looked like that ball skipped into him, hit the ground first. It wasn't a case where he got his hands under the ball and cradled it and it happened to brush the ground. But hey, it stands, and he got the prize for tight ends, the touchdown. Let's look at some pickups and possible streamers for week 13. At the quarterback position, I'm only going to give you one name. I don't see a lot of the other guys don't have great matchups. So if you're missing Tannehill or Rodgers or Mayfield or Cam Newton, consider Dolphins Tua Tagovailoa versus the New York Giants. He's still available in about 67% of leagues, and he is quietly having a pretty nice season. He's completing 70.5% of his passes, which among quarterbacks with any volume, that's second to Kyler Murray in Arizona. And I think it's a good matchup in Miami versus the Giants. I know they shut down Jalen Hurts yesterday, which is kind of a surprise, but I would trust Tua Tagovailoa and certainly Jalen Waddle, who he made look great yesterday. For running backs, it's replacement parts. For Detroit, Jamal Williams is still available in 60% of leagues. I cannot imagine DeAndre Swift will be ready to play this week. So if you're looking for a volume play, I think Jamal Williams is a good bet versus the Vikings. And on the other side of the ball, Dalvin Cook is another guy. Both his shoulders are messed up badly. I couldn't see him coming back. Madison is somehow available. Alexander Madison, that is still available in about 50% of leagues. And that is probably one of the guys I would consider as a handcuff in most situations, but definitely as a starter versus Detroit. A couple of guys that are going to be on bye this week I would talk about recommending. Tennessee's Dontrell Hilliard still available in about 70% of leagues, and Deontay Foreman is still available in well over 50% of leagues. They, like I said, they are on bye this week, but they both had 100 yards on the ground yesterday. Was a little surprised Hilliard wasn't used more in the passing game, but that was an odd game where Tennessee lost by, I think, 23 points, and they ran 39 times and they only threw, I think, 22 or dropped back 22. Consider both of those guys at least as bench stashes so your opponents don't have them going into the fantasy playoffs. At the wide receiver position, I was really surprised to find that New England's Kendrick Bourne is still available in well over 70% of leagues. He is scraping wide receiver 2 territory in PPR. The league that I looked at him in, he's 23rd, 24th. He just produces. He hit the end zone twice yesterday, a really nice 41-yarder where he tightrope down the sideline. I don't know what the Titans were doing on that play. It looked like at least 3 guys had a shot at him and nobody got him. And a guy I'm a little bit hesitant to recommend is Russell Gage of the Falcons. They've got Tampa Bay this week. 3 of the last 4 games, Russell Gage has had some nice production, and he finally found the end zone yesterday. I think Tampa Bay is going to make Atlanta throw a lot. They shut down, for the most part, the run game for the Colts yesterday. They held Jonathan Taylor pretty much under 50 yards until the last scoring drive for the Colts. And I don't think guys like Mike Davis, Quadriolis, and even Cordero Patterson, who had a nice return yesterday, are going to scare the Bucs run defense. So I think they are going to have to throw quite a bit. And Tampa Bay is still pretty banged up in the secondary. So I would consider Russell Gage this week. For tight end, a guy that I talked about very early in the season was Jacksonville's James O'Shaughnessy. With the injury to Dan Arnold yesterday, James O'Shaughnessy got 5 targets. He caught 3 of them. I think he had less than 30 yards, but he did have a 2-point conversion. And Trevor Lawrence liked him very early in the season before he got hurt early in week 2. So James O'Shaughnessy is a guy I definitely would consider starting this week if you need a streamer at tight end. My kicking streamer of the week is another guy that I cannot believe is so widely available. He's available in about 75% of leagues, and that's San Francisco's Robbie Gould, who is one of the most reliable kickers in the NFL. They got a game against the Seahawks, which I would be surprised if it wasn't a decently high-scoring game. The 49ers have just become a run team. And there are certainly field goal opportunities there for Gould and extra point opportunities. My defensive streamers of the week. The first one is Miami against the Giants. Miami's defense has dialed it back to 2020 in the last 4 weeks, which is one of the big reasons why they're on a 4-game winning streak after starting out 1-7. They're available in about 57% of leagues, but I would not be surprised if you can't find them because they have been very good the last 4 weeks. I would imagine that 40+% roster is been mostly in the last 2 weeks. But if you're going a little bit deeper, I don't dislike Kansas City against the Denver Broncos in Kansas City, and they're still available in about 74% of leagues. Before I go, I want to give one more shout out since we're winding down November to the Movember charity for men's mental health, suicide prevention, and testicular and prostate cancer care. There will be a podathon for the hashtag FF Twitter team tomorrow from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m., I believe Eastern Standard Time. The organizer, Dave Kluge, didn't put that on the Twitter post, but I would imagine that's what it is, which would make it 125 on the West Coast. Please find our team page at us.movember /team/2302047. If you have a couple of bucks, please donate. Watch the podathon. Kind of a men's mental health is kind of close to my heart. My dad was bipolar, and that's the reason also that I wear the lid. He gave me a undying love or a curse, depending on your point of view, of the New York Metropolitans and the New York Football Giants. He had a saint of a second wife, my stepmother, Sophie, stood by him through thick and thin. He finally started getting the help he needed after he almost destroyed that marriage. And he and I had a fraught relationship when I was young. He was a god to me, but he could be frightening when he would have one of his manic spells. So that is one of the big reasons I'm supporting this cause. Follow us at 32 and 32 Fantasy Football on Twitter at 32IN32FF. Please subscribe to our YouTube account and like our videos, please, if you do like them. And hopefully we're helping you out. I'm Dave Cruz again. My Twitter handle is in the lower left-hand corner at Cruiser128. I hope you have a great week. Be kind, be respectful, and I will see you here in about 7 days.